Canada's Conservatives have just secured the majority in the House of Commons for the first time in 7 years. Finance Minister Jim Flaherty led the charge with his re-election. Minister Flaherty joins Adam Johnson live from a Bloomberg Link event in Toronto. Adam?
Thanks, Pimm. Yeah, leading the charge is right. First time in 7 years Canada has a majority, or I should say the ruling government has a majority also in the House of Commons. What's job one?
Oh, to stay on course, get the budget done. We introduced the budget before we were defeated in the House of Commons and went to the people, got re-elected with a majority government, so we'll be right back, staying on course, staying on track, getting back to a balanced budget in Canada.
And to balance a budget, how much do you have to lower it?
We'll have to lower it significantly over the course of the next 3 years. We're not going to do anything dramatically or suddenly or in any draconian way because we want to continue with this economic growth in Canada. It's modest, it's moderate, but it's good, and we want to stay on a positive track.
And when you say the growth is moderate, what's the target? What are you aiming for?
We expect economic growth around 3% real GDP this year, something like that next year as well. It's modest growth. Unemployment will gradually come down, but we have to make sure that we continue to have sustainable growth here.
Now, unemployment here is about 7.7%, lower than in the U.S. What is Canada doing that maybe the U.S. isn't doing?
Well, I think we came out of the recession stronger in part because we went into it in better shape.
The banks never took the hit that the U.S. banks took.
Yeah, that's right. And we were paying down debt. We had balanced budgets in Canada, so we were able to have large stimulus, infrastructure stimulus, reduce taxes during the recession, which helped stimulate jobs and create more investment because we went into it in better shape, which I think is really the lesson overall. There'll be more crises in the future. All of us need to be prepared.
Debt to GDP. In Canada, it's, well, there are any number of ways to measure it, but let's call it around 34%, somewhere in there.
Yes.
In the U.S., it's 94%.
Yes.
So, in fact, Canada has a third the debt the U.S. has.
Right, and it's gone up. We were down to about 29% before the recession, and in 3 years, we'll be back there. We'll get back to 29%.
Where would you like to see it?
I'd like to see it continue to go down. You have to have some debt, which makes sense in terms of infrastructure investments and that kind of thing. But we want to be leading the way in the advanced economies in terms of having the least debt burden.
Which I believe out of the G20 is currently the case for Canada.
Yeah, it's good. We're in good shape, and we want to stay on that track. It attracts investment, puts some pressure on our currency. But it's good for employment. It's good for future creativity, more job creation in the country.
Hey, let's talk about currency, the Canadian dollar versus the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
Where would you like to see that?
I think our businesses are relatively comfortable where it is now, quite frankly. They've adjusted to the fact that the dollar's around parity, a little bit more than parity with the U.S. dollar. We don't want any sudden accelerations in the currency. That's what really creates uncertainty in business and in investment. So the kind of confidence we see in the dollar now in part reflects confidence in the Canadian economy, which is understandable, but we want to see a recovery in the United States strengthen, and we want to see the deficit debt situation in the United States get sorted out with a medium-term plan.
At what point would you start to be concerned about an appreciating Canadian dollar?
If we saw sudden spikes in the dollar, which we saw a bit of in 2007, and there was some speculation in the currency.
110, 115.
At that time, it was up in that area, yeah, and it was a fairly sudden rise. That's always a concern because, as I say, it throws business off, business planning, creates uncertainty.
One of the themes at this conference is Canada's open for business, and obviously you got minerals, you got lumber, you've got oil.
Sure.
As world money finds its way to Canada, that's going to push the Canadian dollar up.
It's some pressure on the dollar, but we're also doing a lot of business outside of Canada as well, in the mining sector, in financial services, in aeronautics, in transit. This is a global economy. We're a part of it. We're a relatively small country. We have to be part of the world.
Tim Geithner effectively has your job in the U.S.
Yeah.
What would you tell him?
Oh, we do. We talk quite often.
Well, what did you tell him last time you spoke to him?
Well, we both agree that it's important that all of us, particularly in the G7 and the advanced economies, deal with the deficit debt situations. And it's a challenge in the American political system, of course, to come to an agreement with respect to budgeting that will lead down that track. But we need to do it. All of us need to do it in order to evoke confidence from investors, consumer confidence as well.
Is he doing everything that he can do?
Well, he's got a very difficult job. I mean, we now have a majority government in Canada, so we have much more room to do what we want to do. And
it's a conservative government.
It is a conservative government in Canada. We've had 5 years of conservative government. Now we'll have 4 more after the election we just finished.
Another international question, only 30 seconds. China, that's another big theme here for Canada. Yeah. How important is China to Canada?
It's very important. China finds our commodities very attractive. We're looking for, of course, reciprocal trading arrangements. More of our financial institutions are active in China. We expect that they will be reciprocating when we afford investment opportunities for them in Canada.
And how do you expect them to reciprocate?
Well, we talk. We talk. They realize that they need to follow the rules here, that they need to follow the corporate governance rules, that we don't want any unfair practices. So it's very important that we have a reasonable trading relationship that exhibits reciprocity.
Finance Minister Jim Flaherty, thank you for joining us. Pimm,
my pleasure.
Thanks very much for having us.